Welcome to another show of Celebrate Life. My name is Gary Carolis, and I am your host. The focus of this program, as many of you know, is to show the amazing lives that people live and are living. The key word here is live. Everyone has a story to tell. All stories are worth celebrating. Over the years, I've read too many obituaries that left me pondering, I wish I could have met this person when they were alive. The intent of this program is to celebrate the lives of everyday Vermonters who are all very much alive. If you would like to be a guest on the show, and we are starting to schedule into 2025 now, or know someone who you think would be a great guest, please contact me at celebratelife0747@gmail.com. Now, I would like to introduce you to Ric Flood as my guest today. Welcome, Ric.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Gary.
Good to have you here.
Looking forward to it, I think.
Oh, good. Well, I think you'll enjoy celebrating your life. So, where do you want to start? Where did it start?
Well, where did it start? I was born in Bronxville, New York, June 11th, 1945. We actually lived in Yonkers, but Bronxville was the closest hospital. I always laugh when I think back upon it, because when I was about 30 years old, my mother told me that I was an accident.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the birth control method didn't work, and I was a surprise. So
I see.
They thought they were done after the first two kids,
Right.
and I came along. So I was raised in Yonkers, New York.
Okay.
Went through a public school for the first 6 grades, then a junior high school, and then went to Roosevelt High School in Yonkers, New York.
Oh, yeah.
And where, among other things, I was the only male cheerleader.
Really?
Yeah, we were the Roosevelt Indians, and I was the male cheerleader dressed up as an Indian.
Oh, my goodness.
And
Wow.
ended up getting the most school-spirited award at graduation. Certainly not, valedictorian, but most school-spirited.
Have they changed the mascot?
Yeah, they have,
Yeah.
and they changed a lot of things.
I'm sure
changed
they
a lot
have,
of things.
yeah.
So,
Okay. Well, good for you.
so I went through high school there.
What did your folks do?
My dad was a funeral director.
Okay.
In 1945, the year I was born, he founded the Pelham Funeral Home in Pelham, New York.
Oh.
He had grown up during the Depression, used to wash cars and drive limousines. And another funeral director said to him, hey, I'll get you trained as an embalmer. And he did that for a few years, and then was able to find a silent partner who had some funding. And they started this funeral home in Pelham. And to date, it's still the only funeral home in Pelham, New York.
Oh.
And
Wow.
he operated it until the day he died. My dad worked 7 days a week his entire life,
Oh, my gosh.
and the only day he didn't go to work was the day he died.
Wow.
And one of my favorite stories is he had gotten diagnosed with inoperable stomach cancer. And we had some conversations about wrapping up some loose estate planning items. And I had planned to go down to see him on Monday morning and bring down some paperwork. And I called up Monday morning to let him know I was going to take off in the afternoon to drive down. And his associate answered the phone and said, oh, Ric, I'm so sorry about your dad. So in the meantime, he had passed that morning. And the fun part of the story for me about my dad, who was my hero, he woke up that morning, he knew he had had 2 thoracic aneurysms that had burst.
Wow.
Now, having been an embalmer for
Yeah. You know.
65, When he died, he was the longest licensed, longest practicing funeral director in the state of New York.
Holy mackerel.
But anyway, the morning he woke up and knew that his aneurysms had popped, because he was pretty good with anatomy,
Yeah.
he called Margie, who worked with him for 39 years, and said,
Wow.
"Is everything okay at the funeral home? I'm going to call in sick today." She said, "Fine, we got it covered, don't worry about it." And hour later, we called her again and said, "If everything's under control, do you think you could drop by the house?" And she said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Well, I'm dying and I'd rather not die alone." Aww. So she, and I always choke up when I tell this story, she drove over and sat with him, and 10:30 he said, "Call the funeral home. I need to speak to Anthony." They called the funeral home. Anthony got on the phone and he said, "Anthony, when you take the Carolis funeral out at 11, don't put Hannah in the same car with Esther. Even though they're sisters, they're estranged. They need to be in separate limousines."
Goodness.
And Anthony said, "Oh, Flood, good thing you reminded me. I would have forgotten that." Well, that was a 10:30 phone call. He died at 11:15. So he was still running his business 45 minutes before he passed.
Wow.
And
Wow.
fortunately or unfortunately, I think that's a tree that I dropped from.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am at 79, and the partners are trying to put me out to pasture, but at the moment they're failing miserably. So we're still having a lot of fun, though.
Wow, wow.
But that,
So,
I got off a little.
That's okay.
I grew up in Yonkers as a kid, played Little League baseball and football, and didn't play any hockey. Played a lot of basketball, though I wasn't very good. In my teens, I really got into the Order of DeMolay. That's a junior Masonic organization.
Okay.
You're familiar with the Masons.
Yeah.
DeMolay was
Okay.
the junior Masonic organization, and ended up going through the chairs there and becoming master counselor.
Wow.
And we had 65 different members. Very active, met every 2 weeks, and it was a real good organization to be part of.
Was it community focused, like doing things for the community?
We did a lot of community-focused things, but it was more a fraternal,
Yeah.
brotherhood type
Yeah,
of organization.
Yeah. Okay.
And I had an interesting story in high school when I was getting installed as master counselor. I invited a lot of my friends from high school, and one of my friends, you got to back up a little bit and realize the Knights of Columbus is a Catholic organization. Masonic is a non-Catholic organization because the Masons keep secrets.
Right.
And you're not supposed to do that. So anyway, one of my dear friends was invited, and his mother forbid him to go to the installation because
He was Catholic?
he was Catholic, very devout Catholic. So anyway, long story short, he came, okay? And the second year of college, I was home for Thanksgiving, and I went over to his house, and I was sitting around the kitchen table with him, his sister, and his mother. And his mother sat there and said, "Rick, I really owe you an apology." And I said, "For what?" She said, "Well, I forbid Jim to go to your DeMolay installation, and I guess that was short-sighted of me." And Jim chimed in and said, "That's okay, Mom, I went anyway." Well, she went up one side of him and down the other,
Oh, really?
for disobeying his orders. This is 6 years later.
Oh, that's
It was really funny. It was really funny.
That is a great story.
And when I was 10, my brother, the people across the street, the Haigs, used to vacation at Mallett's Bay. And when I was 10, they invited my brother up to vacation with them because his best friend was Kenny Haig. And my brother was 2 years older, got extremely homesick, real homesick.
Really?
Called home, wanted to come home. I guess he had never been away from home.
Yeah.
So my mom said, look, let's hop in the car, we'll drive up, see if we can get him over this. So we did. In 1955, well, she got her first look at Lake Champlain.
Oh,
That was it.
that was it.
Well, the next year we rented a cottage for a week.
Wow.
And the year after that, we rented a cottage for 2 weeks. And then in 1958, my dad bought a camp out on East Lakeshore Drive
Yep.
for $4,000. $4,000. And his funny story there was the only way he could afford it is a couple years earlier he had buried Mr. McNeil. And at the funeral, Mrs. McNeil, who was well in her 70s, I guess, said, you know, Mr. Flood, I don't know how I'm going to be able to survive. I don't even drive a car. How am I going to get groceries? And my father says, if you ever need a ride to the grocery store, you call me and I'll send one of my men down. Well, for the next 2 years, once a week she'd call.
Wow.
He'd send a funeral director down to drive her to the store to get her groceries. When she died in her will, she left him $2,000.
Oh my goodness.
And he would tell the story. That's the only way he could afford the camp back then,
Isn't that something?
to have the down payment.
Yep.
So, so after that, obviously, we started summering in Mallett's Bay every summer.
Yeah.
And did a lot of fun things. Worked the old Norse's hot dog stand. You may not remember that. You're probably too young. But back then, it was the only public beach in Mallett's Bay.
Huh.
Bayside was not a public beach.
Okay. Huh.
And this was at the north end, just as you make that 90 degree.
Yes.
After you come by Lone Pine, you make the 90
yes.
degree
Yeah.
left.
That
That
was the
beach
public-
there was the public beach.
Really?
And there was a place called Norse's or Clark's. And I used to flip hot dogs there and did that for like 3 summers.
Wow.
And then, of course, when it got time to look at college, I didn't have any other choices, obviously, other than Vermont. There's a little bit of history with Vermont. See, if I go from the beginning to the end, my great-grandfather graduated from UVM in 1888
Really?
and graduated from the med school in 1892. My grandfather graduated in 1912.
Wow.
And I remember one trip that he came up with us. We went and saw his room in Converse Hall
Wow.
that he'd stayed in.
Wow.
He was the manager of the UVM football team in
My goodness.
1910.
Jeez.
And my brother graduated from the University of Vermont in 64. I got out in 67. My sister-in-law graduated in 68. My wife graduated in 76.
Wow.
And my nephew graduated in 1992.
Wow.
So there's
what
a little bit of
wonderful legacy there.
a little bit of tradition there.
And this, so before your brother came to that camp, you know,
Yeah.
there's a long history of Vermont there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's amazing. I don't think I realized that as a 10-year-old
Yeah.
when we drove up
Right.
to Mallett's Bay. But, you know, by the time I got to junior in high school, UVM was the only place I applied to.
Right.
Thank God I got in, you know, because I didn't fill out one other application.
Wow.
And had a real good 4-year run there.
What did you major in?
Economics and political science. Thought I had intended to be a lawyer, but if you count kindergarten, after 17 years of school and college,
Right.
I just didn't have it in me to go back for X number of years.
Right.
And back in 1967, the good old days, you know, 18, 20 companies would come to UVM and set up in the Gutterson Field House
Right.
and interview, and you'd graduate and get 4, 5, 6
Yeah.
different offers.
That's right.
Unlike today,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And the offer that I got after graduation that I took was New England Telephone Company in their management development program, because there was a slot, guess where? Right here in Burlington.
Wow, yeah.
So I started with them, and they called us the IMDIPS, Initial Management Development Program. Okay, so we were the IMDIPS.
IMDIPS.
Yeah, great phrase. And their theory was take you and put you in the pool and see if you can swim.
Mm-hmm.
So with a background in economics and political science,
Yeah.
2 weeks after I graduated, I ended up on the corner of Main and South Union in the telephone company building as an acting plant service manager with 6 foremen underneath me and 84 craftsmen.
Wow.
And of course, at this point, I didn't know how a phone worked, okay? And
Wow.
it's a real fast learning curve. Their program was, let's throw him in the water, see if he can swim. It's 1 year. He sees if he likes us. We see if we like him.
Yeah.
Well, I made the decision about 6 months in that the public utility that was government regulated with a strong union was not what I wanted to be doing the rest of my life. So I had already planned to start looking for something else, and I wanted to get into sales, I thought, where I could be compensated and recognized for my ability,
Right.
not what I would be able to do to encourage 85 people underneath me
Right.
to do better.
That's,
Because it was not easy
yeah.
in that environment
Yeah.
for a lot of the old timers to get anyone to change, okay? So, but life throws you curves.
Yep.
In March of 1968, the union went on strike. So I hung up my 3 pinstripe suits and my wingtips and bought a pair of climbing boots, and they taught me very extensively in 2 hours how to climb telephone poles and fix phones. And for the next 6 months, I was in a green truck every morning at 6 a.m. at the garage, refilling the supplies you needed for the day, and spent the whole day fixing phone problems till it got dark.
Oh my goodness.
And I did that for 6 months.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a big curve.
Big curve. Well, now you have to understand when I say fix phones. If there was a problem, we didn't try to fix the phone. We took it out and replaced it with a new one.
Okay. Yeah.
But the fixing part was climbing telephone
Yeah.
poles, and that was in the day of the old iron wire on the glass insulators.
Right.
You had to go up a pole and say, "Where's the problem? Is it this way or that way?"
Oh my goodness.
And had a couple of close calls because the 2.5 hours extensive training. You know,
Yes. Of course. Wow.
one of my more embarrassing moments was when I cut out on a pole. Cutting out is when you throw your spike in like a knot and it doesn't hold,
Right.
and you start dropping down the pole.
Right.
Now you do have a belt around the pole.
Right. Right.
And Dwight Kelsey was the fellow that taught me. He said, if you ever cut out, what you have to do is throw your arms and legs wrap around the pole.
Huh.
Now these are these tall brown things that are
Yeah.
treated with creosote, and they have all the splinters
Like
sticking out
all
of
over
them.
the place.
Yeah, from all the people that have climbed them with spikes.
Right.
So it took 2 or 3 tries to hug the pole, but I finally did. And I got to the ground, because they tell you if you don't hug it, you're going to break your ankle when you hit the ground. I didn't want to do that. So got to the ground, took my belt off, and looked, and I'll never forget, I had a yellow T-shirt on and kind of light greenish chinos. And it looked like someone had emptied a shotgun on me, because I could see all these little
Yeah.
blood spots.
Yeah. Oh, gee.
So I made my way down to the closest hospital and spent about an hour and a half naked on a table with a resident, an intern, and 4 student nurses while they plucked splinters out of me.
Like a porcupine
Yeah.
hit you.
Yeah.
my
and the next day I was back on a pole.
Oh my goodness.
But so 2-3 weeks after the strike, my resignation was official, and I had taken a job with Connecticut General Life Insurance Company, right here in Burlington. I had interviewed for stock brokerage, for real estate, and for insurance, and I'll leave them nameless because I don't want to pick on them, but the general manager of the brokerage firm interviewed me, and back then they were big into the psychological tests. And he called me up a week later and he said, Rick, I don't know how to tell you this, but you took the psychological test. You'll never be successful selling anything. It's just not in your genes. I said, okay. So I ended up with the insurance company and did that for 9 months on the first round. Back then, when you went to work, probably it's the same way today, they would give you a monthly draw against which you needed to produce commission income.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think my draw back then was $850 a month. And they had a couple months you had a grace period, but sooner or later you had to catch up.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, 9 months into it, I walked into the office one day, had a pair of shorts on and a golf shirt, and my manager, who I'll leave nameless as well, looked at me and he said, what are you dressed like that for? I said, well, I got a 1 o'clock tee time today. He said, you can't play golf. And I said, well, you've obviously seen me try to play in the past. But he said, no, you can't play today. And I said, well, why not? And he said, you're not on validation. And I looked at him, and I'd never forget this. I said, Ray, I am $11.82 off of where I need to be at 9 months.
Right.
There's over $700 of commissions in the hopper waiting to get approved by the home office.
Right.
You're not on validation. You can't play golf today. I said, well, I got a 1 o'clock tee time. And he says, if you play golf, I'll fire your sorry whatever.
Right.
And I looked at him and I said, well, draft up the letter, big boy, because I'm playing golf. Now, the background story.
Pretty bold for a
well,
young
the
kid.
background story is, you remember I told you I was 6 months working the strike during the phone company.
Yep.
Just before the strike started, I had to move out of the apartment I was in. I was out at 40th and Allen with a member of the staff who was changing jobs, so we couldn't live there in the wonderful old Colonel's homes anymore.
Right, right.
And it was just nice enough in the spring, I put my stuff in storage and moved to the lake house. So I've got no overhead.
Yep.
I'm working the strike. During the strike, I banked $21,000 because working 7 days a week for 6 months, because I was single back then,
Yep.
if they needed someone in Bennington for 2 weeks, they'd ship me down. They needed someone in Brattleboro, they'd ship me down. So they're putting me up in a motel, they're paying for my meals, they're paying for my laundry, and I can't spend any money because I'm working 7 days a week.
Right.
So I had banked $21,000. So when I said to the manager, you know,
Write the letter.
draft the letter, well, I came in the next day and the letter, I actually walked in the next day with a cardboard box. And the letter was sitting on my desk. And I just politely put all my stuff in the box, I signed the letter, and I walked out. And a dear friend of mine back then, still a good friend, was Dave Farrell.
Okay.
We were in the JCs together, and we used to have a lot of good times together. Yeah. And I went down to see Dave at the end of the day, and he said, how was your day? I said, well, actually, I got fired. And he looked at me and he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. I never got fired before. And he said, how'd you like to manage the old board? Now, do you remember the old board,
I do
Gary?
remember the old board. Oh, my goodness.
Well, the Farrell family owned the old board.
No kidding.
But back then, I don't know if it's changed, you couldn't own a restaurant and also own a beer and wine distributorship. You couldn't operate the restaurant. You had to have someone else.
Right.
You couldn't run it yourself.
Right, right.
And they wanted to make a change to the manager. And I looked at him, I said, Dave, I don't know anything about running a restaurant. And he said, well, you're there 4 days a week, 5 days a week with me. You know, you can pick things up pretty quickly. And you're honest, because we think we're losing a lot of money. There's a lot of people, you know, it's not well managed at the moment.
Yep.
So I said, well, when do you want me to start? He said, tomorrow morning. I said, okay. I'm like, what are you going to pay me? He told me. And it was a significant raise from what I had made selling insurance. So the next day I started managing the Old Board restaurant.
Oh my goodness.
Well, 2 days later, the assistant manager from Connecticut General came down and said, you know, he really didn't want you to leave. He was just trying to put the fear of God in you. I said, well, obviously he misjudged me. And Rupert said, well, we want you back. And I said, well, I'll come back when I'm done this gig. But I promised Dave that I would do this till they could find a real manager. I don't know if it's going to be 2 months, 6 weeks,
Yep.
you know, a year, who knows?
Yep.
And they said, well, the slot's open for you. You know, he made a bad call. All right. So anyway, my gig at the Old Board lasted 5.5 months.
Okay.
They finally found a replacement who happened to be Burr Vale,
Oh my goodness.
who founded Carber's.
Sure, I know. Yep.
You know Burr?
Yep.
Okay. Funny story there. So I agreed to hang around for a week or 10 days. Burr was coming out of Saga Food Service, and just to show him what I knew, even though I didn't know a lot, even though from the first week we took over managing the place, they started turning a profit instead of showing a loss. We just took all the liquor supply off the open shelving in the kitchen next to where the employees checked out at the end of the night and went out the back door. So we put that under lock and key. We also set up a regulatory system so we could find out how many meals got ordered, how many went out of the kitchen, and how many got back to the cash register. They didn't have that system in place. So anyway, so Burr shows up. We sit down, we start talking, and I said, hey, Burr, where are you from? He said, well, originally Yonkers, New York. I said, Yonkers, New York? Whereabouts in Yonkers, New York? He said, well, my family home was in Palisade Avenue. I said, what number Palisade Avenue? So he told me. Long story short, his parents and my parents lived 2 doors away on Palisade Avenue.
Oh my goodness.
And then the other fun part, Burr Sr. was married to his wife, Susan. My father dated Susan before Susan started dating Burr Sr. Small world. Small world.
That's amazing.
So anyway,
Wow.
finished up the stint at the Old Board, went back to Connecticut General, stayed there a couple years, and then moved over to Smith, Bell, and Thompson to start their Life, Health, Financial Services Department.
Yep.
When I went over there in '72, there were promises of stock options. And when I left at the end of '79, those were still promises.
Oh, shoot.
And I decided this isn't going to work. Ended up going to New Hampshire for 2 years in partnership with another, I'll use the word gentleman, producer. And after 2 years, a quick 2 years, we decided that we both had a different interpretation of ethics. My wife and I went out to a Pizza Hut one night and had a long conversation. And we decided to resign the next day, come back to Vermont.
Yep.
We were down in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Yep.
Nice town.
Nice time.
But we decided to come back to Burlington, which we loved, or Shelburne, and hang out a shingle and start Flood Financial Services from scratch,
Wow.
which was a quantum leap back
Huge.
then.
Yes.
Quantum leap. And we just 2 years ago had our 40th anniversary party down at the Pizzagalli Center at the Shelburne Museum. And we're having a lot of fun.
Amazing.
Having a lot of fun.
Amazing. Where did you get the chutzpah to do that?
What?
To open that, start your business.
Well, when I think back, I tell anybody who's thinking of going into the business today, I wouldn't want to do it all over again. You know, you start a practice like that when you've got no clients. Now, you know a lot of people,
Right.
but you know how much fun it is when you get a call from either a stockbroker or insurance man who says, I want to talk to you about this. You know,
Right.
you'd rather
Go to the dentist.
Exactly, exactly. I just, two things. Number one, my wife, who I will get to in a moment, had a lot of faith in me, and she said, oh, this will be no problem for you at all. And my father-in-law said the same thing. And I just knew I had to get out of the situation I was in.
Right.
Because I was afraid sooner or later there might be some bullets flying in Dodge, and I want to get out of Dodge before they started flying.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
And that was the next best choice at the moment. I said, it'll somehow work out.
Yeah.
So
Did your father's, having him be a successful businessman for all those years, help with that?
well, he encouraged me to make the change as well.
Yeah.
And I just had a lot of cockiness as a younger person. I think I still have a little bit of it, but I thought I could, I mean, after the phone company and climbing telephone poles and managing a restaurant and going back to the insurance business and starting a whole division at Smith, Bell and Thompson, and figured I could do anything.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was going to be quite as tough. I tell the story all the time. The first couple of years, there were months where you wondered whether you would pay the mortgage or the rent first, and which one could you stretch the furthest. But that was 0 clients in 1982 to 762 clients today.
Wow.
And a real fun practice.
Do you remember your first client?
There's a lot of first ones. There's one that come to all our parties who keeps saying that he's the first and the oldest. I keep telling him he's the oldest, he's not the first. One of them was the guy I played golf with that day. Another one was Dave Farrell.
Makes sense.
One that I remember vividly was a fellow by the name of James Bradley Thoman, rest his soul, better known as Jimmy Chicken. He used to manage the Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises here in the state for John Hanses. And we used to party hardy together. And I was sitting with him one night at the Rusty Scuffer.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't called a Rusty Scuffer back then, it was something else. And I was trying to get him to buy disability insurance because he was wild, he was crazy.
Yeah.
Fun-loving, but crazy.
Yeah.
And he sat and said, I'm thinking about taking up hang gliding.
Wow.
And I literally went across the table and grabbed him by the lapels and I said, Jim, you've got a private pilot's license. You're a skydiver,
Yeah.
If you take up another habit like that, no one's going to insure you, and once you do it, they won't cover it anyway. So we agreed to buy a disability policy that night.
Wow.
And we sold him a $1,000 a month disability policy for $39.41 per quarter.
Wow.
I remember the premium, and it had a rider that said, should you ever lose use of 2 limbs or eyesight or speech, your benefit will be a lifetime benefit.
Oh my goodness.
Well, a year later, he was hang gliding
Oh no.
off Sugarloaf Mountain, crashed into a rock ledge, became a paraplegic.
Oh my goodness.
And that policy,
Wow.
up until 2 years ago, when we lost him,
Wow.
paid him every single month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that gave me a lot of drive to not be afraid to tell someone, this is something you need. So,
Wow.
but, you know, back to the business,
Yeah.
it was just, when we hung out the shingle, I remember I used to go to local stockbrokers' offices. And every Monday morning, there'd be a squawk box conference call. And I used to listen to a couple of them with some of my friends, you know. And the sales manager would say, okay, we've just committed to 250,000 of IBM shares. So you got to go out, call your clients, sell these shares. That's what we've got to unload this week. And I thought back and I said, well, that's a terrible way to run a business. Maybe we ought to be talking about what you need to get in your financial package, not what they want to sell.
Right.
And that's how we formed Flood Financial Services. I've tried back then to be a real holistic approach.
Wow.
Do the financial planning, find out what your situation is, and tailor a plan.
Yep. Yep.
And
Wow.
it's worked out well over the years.
Successful. Yes.
Yeah.
Very successful.
Yeah, we in 1990 we bought a financial planning educational marketing program. It's called Successful Money Management. It was a 3-week, 3.5 hours each week educational program that we got St. Michael's College to endorse. And we taught those seminars for 12 years. Taught them at St. Mike's for 10 years, and then we taught them at Green Mountain Coffee, Ben & Jerry's, Planned Parenthood of Northern New England, the Air and Army National Guard, Middlebury College.
Wow.
And that just
that-
really built
yeah, I
really
could
built our business.
I could see. Yeah.
So it was 3.5 hour evening sessions, plus you get invited in for a financial plan afterwards. Well, by the time you finish that program, you'd spent more time with me than you have any other advisor you would talk to.
Exactly.
It just made our
Wow.
business very successful.
Wow.
A lot of hard work for 12 years. If you're out 3 out of 4 evenings every month, and trying to do financial plans for, I mean, the first seminar we did, we had 104 people there.
Oh my God.
82 people turned in all their data and wanted a financial plan.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
very intensive way to go, but it was very good move on my part.
Right.
Yeah.
And this, so you started the business by yourself,
Teena and I,
Teena.
my wife.
Your wife. Okay.
Teena and I got married in 1980.
Okay.
I had met her at actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave out the better part of my first marriage. Okay. I met Teena at a University of Vermont alumni function at the Alumni House on South William Street in December of '77. And she walked in. We used to have quarterly meetings. And then after the meeting, there'd be a cocktail party at the Alumni House. And then whoever wanted to would go out to Dutch Street dinner.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
Well, I was standing talking to the alumni director, and Teena walked in with a gentleman across the room. I knew the gentleman. I knew he was married with 3 kids and 25 years older than she was. So I knew they weren't a couple.
Right.
And I just took one look at her, and the bells started to ring. And I turned to Ann Bowden, who I was talking to, and I said, if that woman is not married or engaged, she's in trouble. And
Wow.
we ended up going to the Dutch Street dinner, which I had to relocate from the Radisson, because I didn't think that was the right venue, to the Cafe Shelburne. And when I didn't make as many points as I wanted dinner at the Cafe Shelburne, I invited the 14 people back to our house for after dinner drinks. So finally got her name, finally found out where she lived, and called her up 2 weeks later and had our first date December 23rd, 1977. I picked her up at Wall Street, and we went out to the Russian tea room and had dinner. And obviously had a good time and invited her up to Vermont for New Year's.
Wow.
And that was back in the day of People's Express.
Yeah. Oh, God.
$19 each way.
Exactly.
So, and we dated 3 years, 300 miles apart,
Wow.
and ended up getting married in 1980,
Wow.
and had our daughter in 1983.
Right.
She is now one of my 3 partners,
Yes, she is.
and she just blessed us 2 years ago with Callista Elizabeth Flood, our granddaughter,
Yeah.
that we're having just a lot of fun with.
Oh, that's
A
great.
lot of fun with.
That's great.
I got my 103 rounds of golf in this summer.
103 rounds of golf.
And when well, I was playing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday mornings. We play first thing in the morning. And even Tuesday, Thursday, we tee off at 7:30. I'm in the office at 11, okay? But when the country club closed on November 3rd, now every Tuesday, Thursday, I go to my daughter's house at 7 o'clock. She's a single mom, and I spend from 7 to 8:30 giving her a little bit of
Yeah.
support, but having a wonderful
Absolutely.
bonding time with
yeah.
Callie.
Oh,
Callie
yeah.
is just so much fun,
Ah,
and really enjoy that time.
that's wonderful.
One of the other fun things that I've done over the years is when Megan was in high school, she was in Rice, she said to me, you know, every holiday vacation, Mom and I go to Williamsburg or Washington, D.C. or New York City to the museums, and you stay home, you make the donuts, you know, because I'm the
You're
workaholic.
working. Right.
She said, we ought to have a father-daughter trip,
Smart
not
daughter.
include Mom. I said, well, put something together and we can do that. Well, next thing I know, 6 weeks later, we were in Bermuda, just my daughter and I. Now, quick backup. My first marriage was 1972 to 1976. Got married and divorced on the same day at exactly the same hour, 4 years later.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Had married a woman with 2 kids, adopted them a month after we got married. And so I've got a 60-year-old son, I've got a 56-year-old daughter, I've got a 29-year-old grandson, a 22-year-old grandson, a 20-year-old granddaughter, and a 2-year-old granddaughter. Okay. Anyway, after the first 4 or 5 years of the father-daughter trips, by the way, we've got 24 under our belt.
Really?
Yeah. My older daughter jumped in because her kids were old enough she could get.
Yeah,
So now
yeah.
we have a father-daughter bonding trip. And we were in Turks and Caicos a year ago. No, this last March.
Yeah.
This last March.
That's fantastic.
So, and it's a great tradition.
That's fantastic.
And someone always says to me, well, father and your 2 daughters, doesn't your wife ever get jealous? Well, one of them, I got back and she said, oh, I just got a great opportunity too. I'm going to the Olympics in France with a good buddy of hers. She did, 18 days. Yeah. I'm away for 4 days with my 2 daughters. She got an 18-day vacation. And she just finished her 7th continent.
Wow.
She just did a 21-day cruise down to, not cruise the whole time, Antarctica.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
flew from here down to Buenos Aires, then down to the tip of South America, got on a big boat, went over to the Antarctica. So she's covered all 7 continents.
That's beautiful.
So she gets her vacation time too.
So how are you doing with the workaholic that you mentioned earlier, 7 days a week like your dad? You were it sounded like you weren't doing great with that.
Well, Well,
How are you doing?
January 7th, I fly to Orlando, and I'll be playing golf from the 8th to the 18th with 42 other guys.
Wow.
I'll be back here for a week, and then the last week of January, we start driving back to Florida. We've rented a house for the month of February,
You're doing beautiful.
and we're going to drive back. So, yeah, we're doing fine.
You're okay.
Doing fine.
Good for you.
So, I will slowly phase out, but you know, one of my favorite quotes in life is Dean Davis. Dean Davis said, "As long as you keep moving, they can't bury you."
There you go.
Okay?
That's a beautiful one.
So
Yes.
the more I keep myself active and busy between golf,
Yes.
fun, travel, the lake house, boating, you know, I think you keep your mind sharper.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'll dabble at it forever.
Absolutely. And with technology today, you can be in Bermuda and still see what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the things the two daughters always picked on me for. I'd be at 7 in the morning, I'd be answering emails, you know, and setting up phone calls. So, the other great quote or phrase that I love, and it came from my dad, and I use it in my business all the time. Dad said in 68 years in the funeral business, he had never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. So you're not going to take it with you. You might as well enjoy it while you're here.
Yes.
And, you know, the old adage that a cat has 9 lives, I think I've gone through 7 of my 9 lives.
Okay.
I've had 7 close calls. I had a serious car accident in 1970, broke every bone in my face,
Oh my
right ankle, left foot, in a coma for 2 days.
Wow.
I joke, I tell people I used to look like Robert Redford, but this is how I came out after the surgery. Bernie Barney, a great plastic surgeon up here, put my face back together.
Wow.
But that happened. I had a near-death experience diving in Belize. Not near death, but it was a close call.
Yeah.
We were bareboating in 1982 and had a little boating accident, ended up with 16 stitches in the top of my head
My goodness.
after they transported me back to the Tortola Hospital.
Wow.
One of my golf trips to Florida, before ship sticks, I stopped in the baggage claim. I picked up my golf clubs, walked out, was putting them in the rental car when I heard gunshots, and that was one of the shooters in the baggage area where I had just come out of.
Whoa.
Shot, I think, 6 people.
Oh my God.
And I've got a few of those other little episodes. So one of the things that came out of that is just an attitude of, you know, I try to live every day as if I was going to live forever. But I try to plan for the future as if I was going to die tomorrow. You know? So,
It's a beautiful, I love that.
yeah. Or vice versa.
Yeah.
I might have backed that one up.
Yeah. Wow.
But, you know, I want to grab every moment. You know, as we approach age 80, you realize parts don't work quite as effectively as they used to.
Yep.
You know, your golf swing isn't quite as good as it used to be.
Yep.
And somebody recently, I forget who it was, somebody recently said, embrace old age.
Exactly.
One of the lessons I really got was from my daughter, Megan, who's 40 or 41, losing track. She just turned 41. Had 2 bouts of malignant melanoma between 30 and 35. And went through a clinical trial in Mass General. She was living in Boston at the time. Full body rash, swelling of the brain, neuropathy in both legs, ileitis, colitis, and 2 cataracts.
Wow.
All side effects of the treatment.
Wow.
And to watch her go through 2 bouts of that over a 5-year period,
Right.
come out the other end.
Right.
Maybe she's related to my dad. She never stopped working. She was employed the whole time.
Oh my
She had a
goodness.
great circle of friends who got her through that. And she just forged forward and made the best of it. Joined our practice in 2018. And then 2021, she said, Mr. Wright hadn't come along yet. I'd like to be a mother, so
Good for her.
modern medical technology.
Yep.
And she's blessed us with that 2-year-old granddaughter.
What a,
That is just
yeah.
the joy of my life. I think I
Absolutely.
have to pull that out.
Let's look at that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Let's see if we can get the camera to zoom in on that.
yeah. She's just so much fun.
Oh, she's a beautiful
Yeah,
girl.
Yeah. So she's one of my heroes too, because she just went through one of the most
Yeah.
difficult times anyone can go through, and
She just looked forward.
absolutely
Looked forward.
never looked back.
Yep.
Never looked back. So
She's got some genes that help her with all that. And
Yeah.
You also mentioned in there that she had a circle of friends, which,
when she was in Boston, there was a period she said that she could barely get off the couch. And she had a village down in south end of Boston.
yeah.
Friends who would come in and cook her dinner every night, pay her bills, write her checks, because her eyesight was so bad.
Right.
And it's a phenomenal circle of friends. And it's one of the reasons we're so, one of our favorite charities right now is the Cancer Patient Support Group. I go to a dermatologist quarterly. They cut stuff off me 4 times a year. This nose and this lip has had over 120 stitches in it in the last year.
Oh my goodness.
Skin cancers that they cut off. Thank God we have a medical facility like we do,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you wouldn't, I know it, but you wouldn't know.
Right. Right.
But yeah, we're blessed.
yeah.
We're absolutely blessed.
Well, it's been great having you as a guest today. Is there any last thing you might want to say, or anything we missed that you want to touch on?
No, I talked about my lovely wife and my daughter, and I love my business.
Yep.
Couldn't be happier with that. Couldn't be happier with 3 partners that I have now, one of which is my daughter.
Yes.
Totally comfortable that if those 9 lives ran out tomorrow,
It would keep.
the business that I built
Yes.
and the clients that we serve are going to be well taken care of. And in the words, I lost my brother at 49 to cancer. I lost my sister at 67 to cancer. But on my brother's tombstone, it's got a phrase, and it says, I have no regrets. And when I look back, I've got a few minor regrets that I'd like to redo, but no major regrets in life. I just want to enjoy the rest of the time that we have on this earth.
That's great.
And take any anger that you've got in your heart and push it out, and just look at the positive.
Yep.
And don't focus on the negative.
Yep. Well said. Thank you, Rick.
Amen.
Yep.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Okay.